Before we actually started doing this presentation, we at Zabbix have spent a considerable amount of time gathering feedback and analyzing how the API is used. We received a lot of positive feedback. So we saw how Zabbix API is used to develop mobile applications, to extend the front end, to integrate Zabbix with other third-party services. Well, sadly, we also received our share of negative feedback. We analyzed that, so we started thinking, how can we make the API better? How can we improve it? And that's what I'm going to talk about. So first of all, I'm going to tell you about the improvements to the existing API features and cover some new features that will be available in the nearest releases. I'm also going to share some of the future ideas we have. So, start with the improvements. Doesn't work. Yeah, okay, thanks. On the top of our improvement list is a thing that no API can actually exist without, is documentation. So for me as a web developer, it's actually a bit sad to realize that no matter how good our API is, how flexible, how powerful it is, it's kind of worthless if it's not documented. So this is a task with the highest priority. We will try to document everything. We will provide examples to demonstrate the functionality, how it can be used, to cover some use cases, so it will be much easier to understand. So yeah, having good documentation is very important. But it's also important to try to design an API that actually doesn't require you to consult the documentation every single time. And this will require some changes to the design of the interface. We will get rid of methods and parameters that are kind of confusing and unintuitive. So currently we have methods like mass remove, group count, or only true, that when you look at them, you can't really understand what do they do. So these methods will be either removed or refactored or redesigned. Another thing we're planning is to group or restructure some parameters so that it will be more intuitive to use. So for instance, the basic output parameters for the get methods. So they can accept multiple values, they can be used together, so there's several independent parameters. They can be all refactored into a single simple parameter that will return either all of the data, or the number of the results, or an array of fields that you requested. That's it. No confusing values, no multiple parameters. A similar approach can be used for other methods and parameters to make the API simpler, more easy to use, and also leave much less room for errors. So, errors in the API is another thing I'd like to talk about. Validation also will be improved. Currently there are lots of methods and places in the API where you can just pass some incorrect, incomplete parameters and only God knows what will happen. So in the future, an API will always throw errors if some mandatory parameters are missing, if unsupported and extra parameters are passed, if the parameter values or data types are incorrect, or at least if anything is wrong with the parameters. But errors will happen, and errors have to be reported. So error reporting is another thing. The error messages need to be as precise, as specific as possible to simplify the debugging process. So just by looking at the error message, you'll need to be able to figure out where did it happen, what went wrong, what are you missing. So currently people who work with the API have seen probably messages like incorrect arguments passed to function, or no permission or third object does not exist. That's not exactly helpful. So if some parameter is missing, it will also always reference the item and the parameter. Another thing about error reporting, we will also implement additional error codes so that the application that you develop, they will be able to properly handle these errors. So we will implement additional error codes for common problems like creating non-unique objects or requesting unexisting objects, or when you're lacking permission and stuff. So yeah, all of these changes are meant to make the API more developer friendly and easier to use. And another very important aspect I'd like to cover is the performance. So, yeah, I didn't even include any text on the slide, the picture says it all. The Zabbix API is kind of slow on large-scale installations. So I'm not going to make any heading promises here, but we have a couple of figures in mind. The Zabbix API should scale to 1 million hosts and 100 million of triggers and items. And the response on such installations from most of the API calls should not exceed 1 second. So this is it for improvements. Let's talk about new features. One of the new concept we're planning to implement is proper API versioning. It is very important to keep track of all the changes that happened in the API. So we'll have a clear versioning policy on how it works. We are currently discussing multiple ideas how this can be implemented. No matter what we decide, we can already promise one thing, that no backward incompatible changes will be made in a single major release. So if your application is designed to work with a 2.2 API, it will work for all of the 2.2 releases. You will also be able to retrieve the version of the API you're currently using to maybe adjust the behavior of the application to some version-specific features. Another thing we're planning to implement is a bunch of whole new great APIs. First of all, the APIs for generating maps and graphs. So you will be able to pass some parameters and in the result get a completely generated image of that map or graph. They may be generated from some predefined graphs you already have configured in Zabbix, or maybe generated on the run from only the parameters you give. You will also be able to easily embed them into your applications to make richer, better visualized interfaces. And another new API we're planning to implement is the API for history and trends. You'll be able to easily retrieve all of the data you've gathered. You will also be able to control exactly how much data do you need. So you can either retrieve all the raw values, or maybe you can retrieve some aggregated data like minimum or maximum or average values for a specific time period, with a specific interval, precision. So everything you need to control the data flow. This will be really useful if you need some additional processing for the values you've collected. So these are some of the new features we're planning for the nearest releases. Now let's talk about some more distant future concepts. We have a lot of ideas how to make the API even more flexible and more powerful than it currently is. One of the ideas is that each parameter, in addition to its own value, can accept even more options to control its behavior. Let's look at an example. For instance, you're using host get to perform a text search. So you want to retrieve all the hosts that contain the word Linux. This will be done by some built-in black box Zabbix. But you will also be able to specify some additional options to change or modify their behavior. For instance, you may pass the list of columns that you want to search by. So this request will return only the hosts that have the word Linux in its name or host name. You may also specify the type of search to perform, like an exact search or search with wildcards. Yeah, I can also see this can be useful. Yeah. So this is just one of the ideas. We're also planning to extend the update and delete methods. So currently you can't really perform complex delete or update methods. You need to first retrieve all of the objects you're planning to modify and then pass them back. This is kind of redundant and not elegant. We would like to be able to perform more complex requests like deleting all old events or reducing an update interval for all unsupported items. This will make writing applications much easier and the code shorter and simpler. Another thing we're actually considering are batch API calls. The JSON RPC standard supports that, so it will be great if in a single remote connection you can actually execute multiple API calls. This will save time for establishing and transferring data. This is very important for mobile applications where the networks are slow, unreliable, and the traffic kind of pricey. This also leaves us a lot of interesting opportunities for optimizing these requests. For instance, multiple GET requests can be paralleled to boost the performance. So this is about the features. These are just a fraction of the ideas we have for the future. But if you're going to take out something out of this presentation, I hope it will be this. So we've actually made quite a few errors while designing the API, but we've also learned a lot of things. So I actually think that the next generation API will be much better, much more developer friendly, much more reliable.
Thank you, Pavel.
If you say there will be features like you improve the error reporting or the method names, is there already a timeline for this, or is there some pages in on the web page where I can view when this might be implemented?
Well, we're constantly fixing it in, let's just say, small steps. So we don't have such a global plan right now. So if we're fixing some, we're affecting some API, we're also trying to fix all the corresponding things.
Okay, because we don't currently use the API, and for me it's a question, is it better to wait 3 or 4 months till I use a new version, or is it okay to start now?
I think you should start now. So
okay.
You'll need to have a look around to get to know it. So yeah, why wait?
Okay, and the second question, if you say you will make complexer requests possible, like delete all data that is older than this, couldn't that not be a problem maybe that you end up in making a wrapper around SQL, because then there will be more and more demands to do complex things, and I ask myself if it makes sense to do this complex task, or if it's then not better to do this in the database directly.
We actually had an idea about the wrapper around SQL. That wasn't a very popular one. But it's actually just a matter of design. If we can make it simple, easy to learn, and easy for us to maintain, we will implement it. If not, then we'll probably need to figure out something else and choose another way. Currently, it's actually only just an idea.
Yeah. I think the difficult thing will be to define the border where implementing and what you implement.
Yeah, we don't want to end up creating a monster that we can control and maintain. Yeah.
Thank you.
We have one question here.
Will I have to rewrite my existing application when 2.2 comes out? Will 2.2 API support the current syntax?
This is currently in question, but most likely it will have some backward incompatible changes. We'll try to make them as few as possible, but there may be some changes and some ideas that are just not. We won't be able to just make them compatible with the new version.
Okay.
You said that some of those things might make it into 2.2. Could you say exactly on which of those improvements are you focusing for the next major release?
Well, first of all, we're focusing on the documentation. So, like I said, this is our top priority. And the next step will probably be validation and error reporting. I don't know if we'll be able to fix everything in 2.2, but we'll start with the most popular APIs like host, items, triggers, and then continue to others. We'll fix as much as we can.
So those new features like generating maps and graphs using API, is it unlikely that this will make it into 2.2 or?
Well, it's hard to make any promises right now, but it's actually likely. Yeah, it may be.
One question: what are your plans, intentions, if you will, for interfacing with the community to help or those that write the interface libraries? How do you intend to work with them so that they can keep up with what the changes are?
Great question. Well, first of all, we need to document all of the changes we made. We will probably implement a separate changelog for the API so that you as developers can easily follow it, see when the changes happened, so to what version of Zabbix they correspond. So, we would also like to hear more feedback from you, so we're actually craving feedback. So send us your examples, send us your success stories, your problems, so we can look at what actually you're doing and maybe help you consult and change and plan the changes according to your needs, not just ours.
And then are there any plans to backport some fixes to egregious challenges such as error codes in previous versions?
Maybe. Just say.
That's needed.
If these changes will be simple enough to backport, I think we'll do it.
Do we have any more questions?
There's one.
Okay. 1 second.
As you have often heard here now, the API is used for configuration management as a XML import export is somehow not really the most useful way to manage configuration. So will be all of the things you can configure be available over the API as it has now been added, like maps and so on, or will there still be some things not be accessible over the API?
Well, our current goal is to make all of the front-end features accessible of the API. I'm not sure if it's actually possible in practice, but we'll make as much features as possible available through the API.
Hello. Regarding sharing information with the community and others, you will work with already registered API features in the publicly available Jira, or there is not yet documented features you will think about or work about? I mean, I just opened the Zabbix Next project into Jira, and there is several feature requests about API, and are those related to new features you're talking about, or there is no documented features?
Well, first of all, we'll focus on the features available on Jira. We also have some internal Zabbix ideas we haven't published yet, but we'll try to integrate them with all the bug requests, all of the feature requests on Jira, and then maybe make a plan on how we can reach both our goals and fix all the issues.
I'm sure that due to this refactoring that you were talking about, there will be some methods that will change their names, change the parameters, so they won't be supported. And could you promise us that you will provide a single document listing all the methods that are unsupported, or perhaps providing their replacements for version 2.2, so that there will be a single document in the documentation with API incompatibilities between versions?
Yeah, like I said, we'll have a separate changelog for all the changes, and we'll also explicitly document all of the backward incompatible changes.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I think the question there was, if I understood correctly, can people follow your current work on modifications to API, if I understood correctly? So that, so that people can see maybe some Zabbix Next and follow what is actually going on.
Oh, sorry, I misunderstood that.
If I understood correctly.
Yes, yes, of course, all of the changes, all of our goals will be publicly available on Jira, like everything else.
1 moment.
So we like the idea of actually programming some, using the API, using all the Ruby stuff and the scripting, but I presume that actually uses the older version rather than the new version. So what would you recommend in regards to us wanting to start using it now, but still wanting to use Ruby as our means?
Yeah, it does work. Like I say, it does work with 2.2 or 2.0 now. It's just maybe one or two objects missing, but that's very easy to add.
You can just use it exactly the same, and whichever version it will.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
It's designed to take care of a lot of the inter API changes, as transparently as possible, so that you don't have to know about them when accessing it.
Right.
That was a design goal from the beginning.
So that's the module, the console, all of it. Yeah. Great.
We have one question that side.
Well, the API
Pavel, you're popular.
Sorry if this is a tricky one. Do you have any idea if the Zabbix web UI will ever be based on the API as a means of dogfooding your own API?
Yeah, that's actually one of our goals. So we're trying to make our system architecture so that the front end will be a client of the API. So it will be basically just an application just like yours or others. It won't have any special features or direct access to the SQL database and stuff. Well, in theory at least. There may be some exceptions, maybe some hacks, but it will mostly use the API.
I think that's a good idea.
Yes.